A waitress whispers just 4 words to a billionaire: "Don't sign this," and unknowingly sets off a chain of events that will expose corruption, resurrect her father's buried legacy, and change both their lives forever. Who is Camille Harris, and how did she go from serving coffee to rewriting the future of tech and justice? This isn't just a story about power. It's about courage, sacrifice, and becoming the legacy you thought was lost. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories like this one. The rain came down in angry sheets, hammering the windows of the Copper Spoon Diner like a warning. At nearly midnight, the streets outside looked more like rivers than roads, slick, glistening, and nearly deserted. Inside, the diner hummed with the tired flicker of aging fluorescent lights and the low murmur of a jazz station playing through crackling speakers. The smell of overused fryer oil and burnt coffee clung to the air like a second skin. Camille Harris moved between the cracked vinyl booths with muscle memory, balancing a pot of lukewarm coffee in one hand and a tray of empty plates in the other. Her dark hair, usually in curls, was pinned back into a no-nonsense bun, and her sneakers, once white, had turned a weary gray. Her apron bore the stains of the night: ketchup, grease, a splash of soda from the drunk college kids who'd left an hour ago without tipping. 30 years old and moving like someone twice her age, Camille had learned long ago that hope didn't pay bills. Her mother, Diane, had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 6 years ago, and ever since, life had become a careful dance of medication schedules, second shifts, and enough stress to crush a lesser woman. But Camille wasn't lesser. She bent, but she didn't break. Not yet. She glanced at the wall clock above the register, 11:47 p.m. Just a few more hours until closing. Then she could head home, feed her mother some warmed-up soup, and pray the electricity hadn't been shut off again. She'd slept maybe 4 hours the night before. Maybe less. The diner door swung open with a jingle that startled her more than it should have. Expecting a bleary-eyed trucker or a teen too soaked to care about curfew, she looked up and froze. A man stepped in, trailing rainwater behind him. He was tall, his soaked wool coat clinging to broad shoulders, the sharp lines of his jaw casting shadows beneath tired eyes. His hair was slicked back, wet from the storm, and his black leather shoes squeaked slightly against the checkered floor. He looked entirely out of place, like a Wall Street wolf who'd wandered into a storybook. Camille blinked once, twice, then gave her usual polite nod. "Sit wherever you want," she said, her voice hoarse from hours of refills and fake smiles. He slid into the booth by the window, dropping a sleek black briefcase beside him. From it, he pulled a silver tablet, tapping it on to reveal a glowing contract. His fingers trembled slightly, subtle but noticeable to someone like Camille, who'd made a second career out of reading people. Grabbing the coffee pot from the warmer, she made her way over. "Evening," she said with a practiced smile. "Coffee?" "Black. No sugar," he muttered, barely glancing up. She poured without speaking. As she did, her eyes caught the bold headline on the tablet: "Reed Holdings finalizes takeover of Halcyon Labs." She nearly dropped the pot. Halcyon Labs. That name hadn't crossed her mind in years, but it used to be everything. Her father, Elijah Harris, had founded the company when she was just a child, a tech firm focused on accessibility software and educational AI. He'd once promised her that one day, Halcyon would change the world. Then he died in a car crash when she was 11, and Halcyon was sold off, dissected, and passed from one cold investor to another until it became just another corporate husk. She refilled the coffee silently and turned away, retreating to the counter with shaky hands. The man kept tapping at the screen, scrolling through pages of dense legalese. He looked exhausted. Not just from the storm or the time, but from something deeper, like the weight of whatever he was about to do had started to eat him alive. She wiped down the counter with slow, deliberate strokes. Her mind, however, raced. Who was he? And what was he doing with that contract? Her thoughts spiraled, tumbling back to her childhood, back to the warm glow of her father's study, where he used to sit her on his lap and show her diagrams of apps he was building. "One day, you'll build something better," he used to say. "Something the world actually needs." But when he died, those dreams went with him. Camille gave up her scholarship to MIT when her mother got sick. She took the first job she could find, then the second. Now she was here, working overnight shifts for barely above minimum wage, her dreams folded up and buried in a shoebox beneath her bed. She wasn't bitter. Not exactly. But some nights, like this one, when the rain tapped a little too hard against the glass and the future looked a little too far away, she could feel the weight of everything she lost pressing against her ribcage. The man muttered something to himself and ran a hand through his hair. He looked like he was trying to convince himself of something. Camille didn't know what possessed her. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the rain. Or maybe it was the fact that she couldn't shake the feeling that this moment mattered in some strange, invisible way. She poured another cup of coffee and approached. He didn't look up. "No thanks," he said curtly. She hesitated, then said, clearly, "Don't sign it." His head jerked up like he'd been slapped. "What?" She swallowed the lump in her throat. "The contract. I saw the name. Halcyon Labs. You shouldn't sign it." He blinked. Once. Twice. "You're serious?" Camille nodded, her voice quiet but steady. "That company, it used to mean something. It wasn't just numbers on a page. It stood for something. And if it's tearing you up this much, maybe it's not the right move." His eyes studied her face, sharp and evaluating. "You don't even know what this is." "I know enough," she said, meeting his gaze. "I know what it's like to lose something that mattered. And I know what it looks like when someone's about to do something they'll regret." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady rhythm of rain against the window. Finally, he leaned back and let out a slow exhale. "You're... what? A waitress?" he asked. "Yep," she said unapologetically. "Name's Camille." He looked at her like she was a puzzle with one missing piece. "Logan," he said after a pause. "Logan Reed." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. She knew that name. Of course she did. Reed Holdings. Real estate. Tech. Pharma. A corporate chameleon who seemed to thrive no matter the sector. And yet here he was, in her crumbling diner, looking like a man who'd just been told his soul had an expiration date. He didn't sign the contract that night. Instead, he slid his tablet back into the briefcase, left a $100 bill under his coffee cup, and stood. "I'll be back," he said simply, his voice low and unsure. Camille gave him a nod. She didn't know if she believed him, but something told her she hadn't seen the last of Logan Reed. As he disappeared into the night, swallowed by rain and shadow, she stood frozen by the counter, her heart thudding in her chest like a warning, or maybe a beginning. Camille didn't sleep that night. Even after she'd tucked her mother in, brewed her chamomile tea, and cleaned the dishes in their cramped kitchen twice over, her mind refused to shut down. She kept replaying the moment again and again. Logan Reed, corporate juggernaut, sitting in the corner booth like a man who'd lost his compass. And her, just a waitress with tired eyes and too many unpaid bills, telling him not to sign a deal that could net him millions. She should have felt foolish, but she didn't. She'd seen something in him. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. Not the loud kind that shouts and scrambles, but the quiet sort that lives in your bones, that comes from knowing what you're about to do, can't be undone. It had mirrored something in her own chest, something she'd kept locked away since her father died. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving behind puddles that glimmered like mirrors in the sun. Camille walked down the cracked sidewalk to the community clinic, holding her mother's hand as Diane leaned into her side. The nurses knew them by name. Camille picked up the latest round of medication, calculated how long she could stretch it, and promised herself she'd figure out the rest later. Afterward, she stopped by the corner store for groceries, milk, eggs, the cheapest instant coffee they had. She passed by a kiosk that carried local newspapers and paused when she saw the name Halcyon Labs again in the headlines. Something about boardroom unrest. Reed Holdings delays final decision pending CEO review. She stared at the paper. It had only been a few hours, but the man had delayed the signing. Her warning had landed. Her words had mattered. It was terrifying. That night at the diner, she didn't expect him to return. But he did. At 11:16 p.m., Logan Reed walked back in, dry this time, dressed in a gray cashmere coat and black turtleneck, less like a wolf and more like a man trying to blend in with sheep. "Your usual seat's open," she said without a smile. He nodded and slid into the booth. This time, he didn't pull out his tablet, just sat with his hands folded, looking down at the chipped table like it was a confessional. You always this bold? He asked as she approached with the coffee. Only when someone looks like they're about to sign their soul away, she replied. He smiled faintly. Then I guess you caught me in time. Camille refilled his cup, then leaned on the counter. You didn't sign? No, he said. I told them I needed more time. The board isn't happy about it. They rarely are when the money train slows down. Logan tilted his head, regarding her. You know more than most people think, don't you? I know more than I get paid for, she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. But that's not what keeps me up at night. He sipped his coffee, watching her with something that resembled curiosity. Then what does? Camille hesitated. She wasn't in the habit of sharing. Life had taught her that secrets were safer in silence. But something about the way he asked made her falter. He didn't sound like a man fishing for gossip. He sounded like someone who genuinely wanted to know. My dad, she said finally. He used to run a company, Halcyon Labs. The words left her mouth before she could second-guess them. Logan stiffened. Elijah Harris? Camille blinked. You knew him? No, yes, I knew of him. Visionary. He was one of the reasons Halcyon caught my attention. But I didn't know you were related. Why would you? She said, her voice quieter now. When he died, everything changed. The company got absorbed, sliced up, sold off. No one asked what it was built for anymore, just what it was worth. Logan leaned forward. How did he die? Car crash, she replied. They said it was black ice. No one really investigated it. My mom and I were just left to deal. I'm sorry, he said, and for once it didn't sound like a line. Camille looked down at the coffee pot in her hand. I was 11. One day he was there, telling me I'd build things he could only dream of. Next day he was gone. And suddenly, I wasn't a little genius in the making anymore. I was the girl with the sick mom and no college fund. Logan's fingers drummed the edge of the table. And now you're working here. Yeah, funny how dreams shrink when life gets loud. She didn't mean it as bitterness, but it came out sharp. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, My dad wasn't like yours. He wasn't a visionary, but he had morals. Small-town investor. Helped local farmers finance their land. Believed in handshakes and eye contact. I used to think he was naive. What changed? She asked. He died, Logan said simply. I was 25, just starting to climb the ladder. I took the reins of his company and decided to make it bigger, smarter, more aggressive. Somewhere along the way, I stopped asking what he would have done. Camille studied him. You think he'd be proud? I'm starting to think he wouldn't even recognize me. They sat in silence, both caught in their ghosts. A few minutes later, he asked, What would you have done with Halcyon if things had been different? Camille's lips tugged into something that wasn't quite a smile. I had this idea once, when I was 16, an app that teaches coding to kids in low-income schools, using games, challenges, interactive stories. Make it fun, make it free. My dad said Halcyon could help fund it one day. That's a damn good idea. Too bad good ideas don't pay the rent, she said, walking away to tend to another table. But Logan didn't stop thinking about it. And he didn't stop coming back. Each night for the next week, he returned to the Copper Spoon, always after 11, always with fewer walls and more questions. He asked Camille about the neighborhood, about her mother, about her thoughts on power. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes they laughed. Once, she made him try the peach cobbler, and he declared it better than anything in Manhattan. It wasn't romantic, not exactly, but it was real. And for Logan, that was rarer than love. He didn't bring the contract back until the 6th night. He placed the tablet on the table like it was radioactive. Camille eyed it. They still want the deal? More than ever, he said. But I did some digging about the original Halcyon board, the ones who took over after your dad. Her stomach tightened. And there's a paper trail. Manipulated financial reports, stock transfers to offshore accounts, even hints that your father was pressured to step down before the crash. Camille felt the room tilt. You think he was pushed out? I think someone wanted him out, and I think his death gave them exactly what they needed. She gripped the edge of the counter. You can prove it? Maybe not in court, but enough to make the board sweat. Enough to ruin reputations. He paused. But if I move forward, I lose everything. The deal, the board, my position. She looked at him steady. Then why tell me? Because you deserve to know, because I'm tired of being the kind of man who wins by forgetting what's right. The air between them crackled like electricity after a storm. For the first time in years, Camille felt seen, not pitied, not romanticized, just understood. She looked down at the glowing screen. Then don't sign it, she whispered again. I won't, he said, but I'm going to need your help. Camille arched a brow. You want a waitress to help you fight your board of billionaire vultures? He smiled. I want Elijah Harris's daughter, the one who still dreams of helping kids code. I want you. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Then her lips curled into a small, fierce smile. Then you better order more coffee. You're going to need it. The next evening, the diner felt different. It wasn't the flickering lights or the sputtering jukebox in the corner that occasionally came alive with static and a burst of Marvin Gaye. It was something else, something inside Camille. She wasn't sure if it was adrenaline, fear, or some unfamiliar cocktail of both, but ever since Logan Reed had walked back into her life, no, not her life, her shift, something inside her had begun to stir. Not in a romantic sense, not yet, but in a way that felt more dangerous, more sacred, like the rusted wheels of a dormant engine groaning back to life. He arrived at 11:09 p.m. this time, earlier than usual. No coat tonight. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing lean forearms dusted with faint scars, business scars, she imagined. Not the kind you got from bar fights or backyard brawls, but from backroom deals and boardroom betrayals. She wondered if he'd ever fought for anything in the dirt, where nothing came clean and no one came out whole. Camille poured his coffee before he asked, placing it gently in front of him with a nod. They didn't exchange pleasantries, not tonight. I looked deeper, he said, skipping straight to the storm. There are emails, internal memos. Halcyon was more than a tech firm. It was a threat to the people who profited from keeping communities like yours underserved. Camille leaned on the booth across from him, arms folded, brow furrowed. You're saying it wasn't just a takeover, it was a takedown, Logan nodded. Elijah Harris built software that could have changed entire education systems. He was trying to license it to public schools, hospitals, nonprofits. But his board? They wanted exclusivity deals with the government, higher margins, private contracts. He refused. That's when they started isolating him. Her throat tightened. So they pushed him out, and then he just happens to die? I'm not saying they had him killed, Logan said carefully, but they certainly had something to gain by him being gone. Camille's heart beat so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. For years, she'd buried the doubts, the ache, the questions that had no safe place to go. But now, hearing it out loud, from a man who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, it was like those doubts had been given permission to breathe. You know, she said, voice low, he used to tell me stories about this app he was building. It would let kids like me learn to code using comic books. You'd pick a character, robot, witch, superhero, and every challenge you solved was a piece of the story. He called it Loopverse. Logan's eyes lit up. That's in the archives, buried under abandoned patents. I saw sketches, code samples. I thought it was just a concept. Camille smiled faintly, the kind of smile that tasted like rusted memories. He made me the beta tester, said I had the sharpest mind he knew. You still do, Logan said before he could stop himself. She looked up at him, her eyes sharp, unreadable. Don't flatter me, Reed. Not unless you mean it. I do, he said simply. A beat passed. Just silence and the hum of the diner's dying refrigerator. Logan leaned in. I'm calling a board meeting in 2 days. I'm going to propose a full halt on the acquisition and redirect funding to restore Halcyon's original mission. Camille blinked. That's suicide. You're going to lose your company. I already lost it, he said, the minute I let numbers matter more than people. You reminded me of that. Her lips parted, but no words came out. How do you respond to someone telling you that your voice, not your resume, not your pedigree, just your voice, had the power to realign their entire world? You'll need proof, she said finally. Evidence, records, leverage. I've got enough to rattle them, Logan replied. But I need more, something personal, something that speaks louder than spreadsheets. Camille stared at the counter, fingers tapping in thought. I might have something. He lifted an eyebrow. My dad kept journals, old school, leather-bound. Most of them got boxed up after he died, but I think there's one left, in the crawlspace under our stairs. Think it's relevant? He wrote everything down: ideas, fights with the board, things he didn't trust email with. Logan stood that suddenly electric. "Can you get it?" "I can try," she said, "but my mom doesn't know I'm digging into this. And if she finds out—" "Camille," he said gently, "you don't owe me anything. If this is too dangerous—" "No," she interrupted. "This isn't just about you, or her, or me. It's about what they took, and I'm not letting them take anything else." He watched her, eyes filled with something that looked like admiration, or maybe fear, because Camille wasn't the kind of person you could control or predict. She was the kind who cracked foundations with her silence, who made kings shake just by standing still. Later that night, she crawled under the stairs in their apartment, flashlight clutched between her teeth, hands grazing dust and splinters. She felt like she was reaching into the mouth of time, trying to pull her father back by the edges of his handwriting. She found the journal in a shoebox, beneath a pile of yellowed Halcyon newsletters. The leather was cracked, but the pages intact. On the inside cover, written in her father's looping script, were the words, "For Camille. If anything happens to me, don't let them turn light into shadow." She didn't cry. Not then. She didn't have the time. By the following evening, Logan had everything in motion. He came to the diner in a suit again, more tailored this time, like a man stepping into war dressed for a funeral. He slid into the booth, and she placed the journal on the table between them. "You sure?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I'm done being afraid." They flipped through the pages together, side by side, her father's words painting a picture of a man cornered by greed, but unwavering in purpose. Details about boardroom arguments, refusals to sign NDA deals, whispered threats from legal teams. Camille's hand trembled as she read, but Logan's was steady, each page sharpening his resolve. "You're going to burn bridges," she said quietly. "I'd rather burn them than keep pretending they lead anywhere good." They shared a long look, the kind where no one smiled and yet everything was understood. As he stood to leave, she touched his arm. "Logan?" He turned. "Be careful. They'll fight dirty." "I've met worse," he said, "but I've never had someone like you in my corner." She watched him go, heart pounding in her throat. A strange calm settled over her as the bell over the door jingled in his wake. That night she stayed after close, cleaned the counter 3 times, let the radio hum low while she stared out at the dark city. Somewhere out there, a war was about to begin, one sparked not by revenge but by truth, by memory, by legacy. And she, Camille Harris, waitress, daughter of a dreamer, had just helped light the match. Logan didn't sleep the night before the board meeting. He didn't even try. The city outside his penthouse shimmered with artificial light, towering steel and glass monuments blinking like indifferent gods. But inside, everything was stripped bare. The papers were laid out across the mahogany table in his living room, copies of Elijah Harris's journal entries, annotated board documents, leaked emails, and a printout of Camille's original loopverse concept she had sketched when she was 16, digitized, enhanced, and coated with potential. He had assembled a war chest, not of lawyers and lobbyists, but of truth, the kind that didn't ask for permission and didn't apologize. By morning, he looked like a man who had stared into the eye of a hurricane and decided to walk straight into it. No tie, no mask, just conviction. When he entered the boardroom at Reed Holdings' Chicago headquarters, all 12 members were already seated, eyes sharp, jaws tighter than their tailored collars. Derek Knox, the chairman and Logan's longtime mentor turned antagonist, sat at the head of the table with his hands folded like a man about to gut a fish. "You called this meeting. You have the floor," Derek said without even glancing up. Logan didn't waste time. He connected his tablet to the projector and dimmed the lights. With one tap, the screen lit up with the first journal entry. March 3, 2002. "They want to sell the soul of Halcyon. I told them no. I won't let them build walls where I was trying to build bridges." "What is this?" muttered one board member. "This," Logan said, voice steady, "is the written testimony of Elijah Harris, Halcyon Labs founder. It documents the board's attempt to turn a humanitarian technology platform into a privatized surveillance tool. It's also proof that Halcyon wasn't failing, it was sabotaged." Murmurs rippled through the room. Derek's jaw flexed. "And what's the relevance to us exactly?" he asked. Logan took a breath. "Reed Holdings' current acquisition plan is built on a lie. You're about to purchase a company whose value was intentionally distorted. I'm terminating the deal. Effective immediately. A pause, then chaos. You can't do that. This will cost us hundreds of millions. The investors won't stand for it. I don't care, Logan snapped, his voice cutting through the panic like a blade. If this is what leadership looks like, ignoring ethics for margins, then maybe I don't want to be your CEO. The room froze. Even Derek leaned back, blinking slowly. You've lost your mind, he said finally. No, Logan said. I've found my conscience. He tapped again, showing internal emails confirming a deliberate delay in Loopverse's development. Legal memos. Strategic redlining. Camille's father had fought back, and they buried him with non-disclosure agreements and severance clauses. And when that wasn't enough, they let the world think he was just another failed idealist who died too early. The room sat in stunned silence. Derek leaned forward, voice now low and lethal. Do you think this makes you a hero? You're gambling with the future of this company, and all for a waitress with a sob story? Logan's gaze hardened. Her name is Camille Harris, and she's the reason I remembered who I am. With that, he walked out. Downstairs, reporters waited, just as Logan planned. He'd leaked the news the night before. When they swarmed him, microphones pointed like weapons. He didn't flinch. I've terminated the Halcyon acquisition, he announced. It was built on false pretenses. I've also launched an internal investigation into the firm's historic partnerships and acquisitions. Effective today, I'm stepping down as CEO of Reed Holdings. Gasps, flashes, questions. But Logan didn't stay to answer them. He walked to the curb, took off his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and for the first time in years, felt like a man, not a machine. Across town, Camille stood in front of her mother's stove, stirring canned soup when her phone buzzed. The push notification hit her like a train. Breaking, Logan Reed resigns amid Halcyon scandal. Whistleblower tied to tech pioneer Elijah Harris. She read it twice, then sat down hard on the kitchen stool. Her mother, Diane, peered from the living room. Everything okay, baby? Camille stared at the screen. Her throat tightened. Yeah, she said. Just, yeah. The next day, Logan didn't show up at the diner, or the next. Camille told herself it didn't matter. He had a war to survive, a company to walk away from. But by day 3, she felt the absence in her bones. On day 4, he came back. Not in a suit, not as a CEO, just Logan. He slid into his usual booth. Camille didn't say a word as she poured his coffee. He looked up at her, that same tired fire in his eyes. I lost 70% of my wealth in 48 hours, he said with a dry smile. She arched an eyebrow. Congratulations? I think so, he said. Depends on who you ask. You still got your penthouse? I sublet it. Moved into a 2-bedroom loft. She paused. You okay? He nodded. Better than I've been in years. They didn't talk business that night. They talked about everything else. Camille told him about her mother's latest test results. He told her about the time he crashed a hedge fund gala by accident and spilled a glass of champagne on Oprah. They laughed until her sides hurt. As the clock crept toward closing, Logan reached into his coat and pulled out a manila folder. He slid it across the table. What's this? She asked. A proposal. She eyed him warily. I'm not signing anything. Good, he said. This time, you're the one in charge. She opened the folder. It was a business plan, lean, focused, and beautiful. At the center, a relaunch of Loopverse with Camille as Chief Innovation Officer, a pilot program in underfunded schools, partnerships with nonprofits, tech scholarships, real impact. Her hands trembled. Why me? Because it was always yours, he said. Your father dreamed it, you carried it, and now you get to build it. She didn't answer. Not at first. She read every page, every line. She imagined her father's face, how proud he would be. Then she looked at Logan. This doesn't mean I forgive everything, the world you were part of. I know, he said softly. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to do better, with you. Her throat tightened. She looked at the window. Rain had begun to fall again, soft and steady, a familiar rhythm, but this time it didn't feel suffocating. It felt like cleansing. She nodded. I'm in. And just like that, the girl who once buried her dreams beneath diner floors became the woman rebuilding a legacy. That night, Camille walked home beneath a shared umbrella with Logan. No more titles, no more masks, just 2 people, bruised but trying. As they passed a closed bookstore window, she caught her reflection next to his, and smiled. Maybe the world had tried to break them, But they hadn't shattered. They'd chosen to build. Camille had never been on an elevator so sleek, so silent. As she rose higher through the towering glass building, now designated as the new headquarters of the Halcyon Initiative, her reflection stared back at her in the mirrored walls. A woman no longer wearing a waitress apron, but a tailored blazer over a cobalt blouse. She didn't feel entirely like herself yet. But then again, she wasn't who she used to be. The doors opened with a gentle chime, revealing a sunlit floor of wide-open space and humbly ambitious chaos. Desks were scattered in neat clusters, papers and whiteboards filled with sketches and strings of code, and the murmur of quiet collaboration rippled through the air like music. This wasn't the old world of Logan's steel and glass kingdom. It was a new world, their world. Her heels clicked softly as she walked toward the glass office at the far end. It had her name stenciled on the door, Camille Harris, Chief Innovation Officer. She stopped for a breath. The letters looked surreal, like someone had printed them just to prank her, but they were real. She reached for the handle and her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. Camille Harris. Hey, Cammy. The voice twisted something deep in her stomach. Her whole body tensed. It had been nearly a year since she'd heard that voice. Malcolm, she said slowly. Why are you calling me? Wow. No, how have you been? No, glad you're alive? That's cold. You disappeared after stealing money from Mom's disability account and ghosting us when she ended up in the hospital. I'd say cold is generous. Okay, he said, still in that half-laughing tone he used when he knew he was in the wrong but didn't want to say it. Listen, I heard about your little rise from the ashes, tech prodigy reborn, working with Logan freaking Reed. I mean, damn. Sis, you're glowing. Camille moved into her office and shut the door gently behind her. What do you want, Malcolm? I need a favor, she exhaled, rubbing her forehead. Of course, I'm trying to stay clean now, all right? No more dumb gigs. But there's this guy I used to know, used to work at Halcyon. Said he's got info, big stuff, real dirt from back in the day. Camille's chest tightened. Why are you telling me this? Because he wants to talk to you. Not the police, not the media, just you. Said you're the only one who might care about what actually happened to Dad. Her breath caught. Meet me tonight, Malcolm said. I'll text you the spot. He hung up. Camille stared at the phone in her hand. A dozen instincts screamed not to trust him. But one instinct, the one that had never gone quiet, whispered back louder. If there's a truth still hiding out there, you owe it to your father to find it. That evening, she didn't tell Logan where she was going, not because she didn't trust him, but because she didn't want to see the concern in his eyes. She didn't want to be talked out of it. The meeting spot was a closed laundromat on the south side, lights off except for a single yellow bulb flickering above the entrance. Malcolm waited outside, shifting from foot to foot like he always did when he was trying not to bolt. You came, he said. I'm not here for you, Camille replied. Where is he? Inside, toward the back, a man sat on an overturned detergent bucket. He was maybe in his late 50s, hair thin and gray at the temples, with a sunken face and eyes that looked too tired for this world. He didn't stand when she entered, just studied her like someone comparing the present to a memory. You look like him, the man said. Camille nodded slowly. You knew Elijah Harris? I worked with him, on Loopverse. I was on the UI team. We used to joke about how he never slept. He'd walk in with a half-finished idea, and by lunch, it would be a prototype. Why didn't I ever see your name on the staff list? I left before things went bad. They paid me to keep quiet, but I kept copies. I knew one day someone might come looking. He pulled out a USB drive from his jacket and held it up. This has meeting transcripts, recordings. The day they forced your dad to sign over controlling interest. The day he got the phone call, the one that made him leave the office early. Camille froze. The day of the accident. He nodded solemnly. They wanted Loopverse to be a surveillance tool. They could have used it to monitor kids, predict behavior, sell data. Your dad refused, so they buried it. And when that didn't work, they buried him. She took the USB, her hands shaking. Why now? Because I'm dying, he said simply. And I figured, if I go, at least someone should know the truth. Camille left the laundromat in silence, Malcolm trailing behind her. I didn't know he had that, her brother said, sounding small for once. I didn't bring you here to hurt you. She stopped in the parking lot, turned, and looked him dead in the eye. "You didn't bring me here to help me either. I want to fix things." "Then stay gone," she said quietly. "That's the best thing you can do for us now." She turned and walked away, the weight of the USB heavier than it should have been. The next morning, Camille placed the drive on Logan's desk. He looked at her, silent, waiting. "It's everything," she said. "Proof that Halcyon was poisoned, that my father didn't just die, he was hunted." Logan picked up the drive gently. "Do you want me to release it?" "No," she said. "We release it, together." They spent the day working side by side, writing statements, verifying files, preparing the storm. When it all went live that evening, press releases, internal memos, a public data dump, they braced themselves. The backlash was immediate. The old board members lawyered up. Journalists camped outside Halcyon. Social media exploded. But there was another wave, too. People shared stories about Elijah Harris. Teachers, students, early users of Loopverse. A forgotten legacy was rising from the ashes, lit by digital torchlight. Justice for Elijah trended for 3 days. And Camille? She didn't cry. Not at first. It wasn't until her mother, seated beside her in their apartment, whispered, "He would be so proud," that the tears came. She let them fall freely, like the rain the night Logan first walked into the diner. Because now, she wasn't carrying her father's burden alone, she was honoring it. And for the first time in her life, Camille Harris didn't feel like she was chasing a ghost. She was the legacy. The following weeks were a whirlwind Camille could barely keep up with. Between interviews, legal statements, and the chaos rippling through the tech world, she found herself navigating a space that once felt unimaginable. But she wasn't alone. Logan stood beside her through it all, steadfast, quiet, never trying to take the spotlight, but always ready to absorb the hits. The Halcyon Initiative, once considered a failed experiment buried in the past, was suddenly a symbol of something rare in the corporate world: redemption. Investors who had once written off the project were now reconsidering. A few had even publicly apologized, while others stayed silent and watched from the shadows, waiting to see which way the tide would turn. Journalists called it the Halcyon Resurrection. But for Camille, it wasn't about headlines. It was about memory. It was about justice. She walked through the initiative's new community center one afternoon, pausing by a classroom where a group of middle schoolers were learning basic logic through a prototype of Loopverse 2.0. The interface had changed, sleeker, more interactive, but the heart of it remained the same: coding through storytelling, adventure-driven algorithms, challenge-based problem-solving. The kids weren't just learning, they were playing, laughing, growing. One of the girls, maybe 12, looked up and beamed. "Miss Camille, I made my robot defeat the maze with a recursive function." Camille laughed, feeling a warmth she hadn't known she was missing. "Show me." The girl turned her tablet, and Camille watched the pixelated robot navigate a shifting labyrinth, adapting each time it failed. It didn't get it right the first try, or the second, but eventually it found its way through, just like her. Later that night, after the last kid had left and the lights were dimmed to a gentle glow, Camille sat in her office, the one filled with plants and whiteboards and a photo of her father by the window. She was reviewing a grant proposal when her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. She nearly didn't answer, but something told her she should. "Camille Harris." "Fancy title you got now," came the voice. Lower this time. Harsher. It was Malcolm. She stiffened. "What do you want?" "I need to see you," he said. "In person. It's important." "You already burned whatever bridges were left, Malcolm." "I know," he said, and for once there was no charm in his voice. "But I found something else, something I think you and Logan need to see. It's not just about Dad anymore." "Where?" He named an old warehouse near the river, abandoned years ago. Quiet, isolated, too quiet. Camille hesitated. "Don't bring anyone," Malcolm added. "If you do, it's off." The call ended. She stared at the phone, pulse racing. Her instincts screamed trap, but her gut, it twisted differently. This wasn't Malcolm's usual conman confidence. There was desperation in his tone. Fear. She paced her office, considering every scenario, every outcome. Then she made the call. "Logan, I need backup." Half an hour later, Logan pulled up outside the warehouse, dressed in jeans and a dark jacket. Camille met him at the corner, away from the entrance. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I need to know." I'm coming with you. He said not to. Logan met her eyes. And when have you ever done what you were told? She smiled despite herself. Point taken. They entered through a side door, the metal creaking under their hands. Inside, it was mostly dark, just the faint glow of a single work lamp in the far corner. Malcolm stood beneath it, looking thinner than she remembered, his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. You came, he said. Both of you. Camille didn't bother with pleasantries. Talk. He gestured to a folder on a crate nearby. There's a name missing from your journal entries, from the board memos. Someone with more power than any of them, silent investor, paid to stay invisible. Who? Logan asked, stepping forward. Malcolm licked his lips, glancing around nervously. Franklin Vaughn. Camille blinked. Vaughn? As in Vaughn and Mitchell Capital? That's the one, Malcolm nodded. He was the money behind the curtain. He bankrolled the buyout of Halcyon. He's been investing in the companies using Waitress stripped code for years. Military tech, private prisons, even electoral software. Logan clenched his jaw. You have proof? Malcolm nodded and reached into his coat. That's when Camille noticed it. His hands were shaking. Not the usual twitch of nerves. This was different. Before she could speak, a loud click echoed behind them. Drop it, came a voice. Cold, commanding. Two men stepped from the shadows, guns drawn. Logan instinctively moved in front of Camille. Malcolm froze. I told you, just her. The taller of the two men stepped forward. And you think we're stupid? You think she was going to walk out of here without backup? You made this messy, Malcolm. Camille's heart pounded in her ears. Who are you? We're the cleanup crew, the man said. You stirred up ghosts, Miss Harris, but some ghosts don't want peace. They want silence. Franklin Vaughn sent you? He sends no one, the man replied. We just protect his interests. Malcolm stepped forward, hands raised. They don't need to get hurt. I brought the drive, all right? I'll give it to you. Just let them go. Malcolm, no, Camille said. Shut up, he barked. I messed up, all right? But I'm not dragging you down with me. You still got something to live for. He tossed a small USB drive toward the men. One of them caught it. This better be the only copy, he growled. It is, Malcolm said. I swear. The man looked at his partner, then nodded. Fine. Then he raised his gun. Logan lunged. A shot rang out. Chaos exploded. Camille hit the ground hard, glass shattering above her. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Logan was on top of her, shielding her, but she felt something warm seep across her side. Logan, she gasped. Stay down, he hissed, dragging her behind a crate. Malcolm had tackled one of the men and was fighting for the weapon, yelling for Camille to run. Another shot, then silence. When it was over, Logan's shirt was soaked in blood, not his. Malcolm lay on the floor, gasping, one hand pressed to his abdomen. Camille crawled to him, heart breaking. You idiot, she whispered. Why? He smiled weakly. Guess I owed you something. Tears blurred her vision as she held his hand. The sirens were already wailing in the distance. Logan must have triggered an alert on his phone. You'll make it, she lied. He laughed once, a bitter exhale. Sure. The paramedics arrived too late. At the hospital, Camille sat beside Logan, who'd suffered a fractured rib and a nasty gash across his arm. You shouldn't have come with me, she whispered. I wasn't going to let you go alone, he replied. You're not alone anymore. Later, the authorities raided Vaughn's shell companies. The leaked files were enough to launch federal investigations. Camille handed over everything, the drive, the journal, the recordings. She testified before the Senate 3 months later. She didn't speak as a victim, she spoke as a builder. And when she finished, the room stood in silence, the kind that followed truth too heavy to ignore. Malcolm was gone, a complicated man. But in the end, he'd done the one thing that mattered. He tried to make it right. And Camille? She walked out of that chamber, not as Elijah Harris's daughter or Logan Reed's partner or Loop vs. developer. She walked out as Camille Harris, a survivor, a leader, a storm that learned how to speak. 3 months after the hearing, the city had settled into a quiet that Camille didn't fully trust. The Halcyon initiative had stabilized, and the worst of the media frenzy had passed. Franklin Vaughn had disappeared from public view, his accounts frozen and assets seized. Legal proceedings were ongoing, but Camille no longer woke up in fear of the next headline. Still, there were scars, unseen and deep, and she carried them like echoes in her chest. Some days she still reached for the coffee pot before realizing she wasn't in the diner anymore. Other days, she found herself wandering back to Tony's, just to sit in the booth by the window where everything had begun. She didn't order anything. She just watched the rain and remembered. Logan was healing too. The bullet had missed anything vital, but the recovery was slow. It wasn't just his ribs, it was the weight of it all. Stepping down from his empire, going to war with the very machine he helped build, and nearly dying for a truth he didn't even know he believed in until he met her. They saw each other less now, but not for lack of feeling. It was more like gravity, quiet, constant, undeniable. He'd taken a consulting role with Halcyon's ethics board, but kept his distance from daily operations. Camille was the one leading now, and he respected that. Still, every Friday at 6 p.m. he showed up with takeout from the Thai place they both liked, and they ate in her office like old friends clinging to something precious. One Friday, he arrived early. She was standing by the window holding a letter. "You okay?" he asked, placing the food on the desk. She didn't answer at first, just handed him the envelope. It was sealed in wax, the kind no one used anymore. Elegant, dated, unmistakably personal. He opened it and read the first line aloud. "Dear Camille, if you're reading this, then I didn't get to finish everything I started." Logan looked up, stunned. "My father," she whispered. "I found it in one of the journals, folded into the spine. He wrote it days before the accident." He continued reading. "There's a battle coming, not with guns, but with silence. They'll try to rewrite what we built, reduce it to profit margins. I know you're young. I know it's unfair. But you have my mind. And more importantly, you have your mother's heart. That's a force the world won't see coming. You'll want to give up. You'll want to play it safe. Don't let them shape you into someone small just because you were born into a fight. You are my legacy, Camille, not the company, not the code. You. I love you endlessly, Dad." Logan's hands trembled slightly as he folded the letter. She sat down slowly, blinking away the tears. He knew it would come to this. "You honored him," Logan said quietly. "You did more than he probably ever dreamed." She gave a sad smile. "Funny thing is, I didn't do it for him. Not really. I did it because I couldn't breathe knowing the truth and staying quiet." He nodded. "And now what?" Camille leaned back, gazing out at the skyline. "Now, we build." She wasn't just talking about Halcyon, or Loopverse, or even justice. She was talking about the future. A month later, Camille stood at the opening of Halcyon's first satellite center in Atlanta, a sleek, sunlit space designed for underserved students. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was small but powerful. Local leaders, former teachers, a few of the original engineers who had worked with her father, all stood beside her, smiling like they'd found a piece of something long lost. She cut the ribbon with quiet grace, her mother watching from the front row, eyes shining with pride and a touch of sorrow. Afterward, Camille walked through the center, high-fiving kids, chatting with parents, and checking the equipment herself. She was hands-on. That was how she'd always been. In one room, a boy about 11 was hunched over a tablet, his brow furrowed in concentration. On the screen, a dragon-shaped AI was helping him solve math problems through puzzle gates. She crouched beside him. "Need help?" she asked. "Nah," he muttered. "Just thinking." She grinned. "You're allowed to ask for help." He looked up. "You made this, right?" "I helped, but it's yours now." He smiled wide and said something she didn't expect. "My mom says I'm not dumb, that I just learned different." "This helps." Camille's chest tightened. She ruffled his hair gently. "Your mom's right." That night, back in Chicago, she walked into her apartment and collapsed on the couch, exhausted but fulfilled. She closed her eyes, feeling the world quiet for a moment. Then there was a knock at the door. Logan. He held a manila folder in one hand and 2 milkshakes in the other. "Strawberry?" she guessed. "Banana," he replied with a smirk. She rolled her eyes, took one, and gestured for him to come in. They sat on the floor this time, legs stretched out, old records spinning in the background. "What's in the folder?" she asked between sips. "A new idea," he said. "A platform for whistleblower protections, corporate accountability, inspired by a certain Senate testimony I watched 5 times. She laughed. "You're obsessed." "Only with the parts of life that matter." They didn't talk much after that. Didn't need to. They just sat there in the soft glow of a lamp, the world outside moving too fast while they slowed down, Later, as Camille looked at him, not the man he'd been, but the man he'd become, she realized something. Forgiveness wasn't a finish line. It was a choice you made every day. And Logan? He'd chosen differently, chosen better. And so had she. Weeks passed, then months. Halcyon grew. Camille started traveling more, Detroit, Oakland, New Orleans, bringing Loopverse into more schools, hiring from the communities they served, building not just apps but futures. She started a scholarship named after her father and a separate fund in Malcolm's name, one dedicated to helping at-risk youth redirect their paths. One morning, while setting up a classroom in Detroit, she got a call, a young woman's voice, nervous. "Hi, is this Camille Harris?" "Yes," Camille said. I was one of the kids who got into tech because of Loopverse. I just got accepted to MIT. Camille swallowed the lump in her throat. "Congratulations." "I wanted to say thank you. My mom said I should tell the people who built the bridge that I'm crossing it." Camille hung up, sat down on the edge of a chair, and let the tears fall. They weren't tears of grief anymore. They were tears of growth. That night, back in Chicago, she returned to Tony's diner. She didn't sit in her old booth. She walked behind the counter, poured herself a coffee, and nodded to the current waitress, a girl barely 20 with tired eyes and a notebook poking from her apron pocket. "You write?" Camille asked. The girl looked up, startled. "Yeah. How'd you?" Camille smiled. "I used to dream here too." She left a $100 tip and walked out into the rain. But this time it didn't feel like a storm. It felt like a baptism. A beginning. The sky was lavender that morning, soft and streaked with light, the kind of sunrise that didn't announce itself, but quietly entered the world. Camille stood on the rooftop of the Halcyon Initiative headquarters, watching the city come to life below her. The hum of traffic, the rhythm of distant footsteps, the glow of windows blinking awake. It all felt like a symphony she had somehow helped conduct. She wrapped her coat tighter around her and breathed in the crisp air. Another center was opening next week in Philadelphia, and 2 more were slated for the spring. Loopverse had been implemented in over 50 schools. Partnerships were growing with educators, activists, community organizers. What began as a whisper of an idea had become a chorus of transformation. Behind her, the door creaked open. "I knew I'd find you up here," Logan's voice came, casual but warm. Camille turned slightly. He walked toward her with 2 mugs in hand, steam curling from the tops. "Is that cinnamon coffee?" he said with a grin, handing her one. "Your favorite." "You remembered," she said, accepting the mug. Their fingers brushed. Neither of them mentioned it. He leaned against the railing beside her, looking out over the city. "Do you ever stop?" "Trying," she said, sipping. "But there's always one more school, one more meeting, one more kid who could use a shot." He nodded slowly. "You ever think, maybe you don't have to carry it all alone?" She gave a small laugh, not dismissive, just tired. "I'm learning, slowly." They stood in silence for a while, the kind that didn't feel awkward but companionable. Logan had grown quieter over the past few months, less of a storm and more of a tide, present, calming, steady. He wasn't trying to prove himself anymore, and Camille wasn't trying to fix him. They had come through the fire and come out different. Burned, yes, but also refined. "You know what today is?" he asked softly. Camille looked at him. "It's been a year." He nodded. "1 year since the night I walked into that diner. 1 year since you told me not to sign the deal." She stared into her coffee. "Feels longer, or shorter," he offered, "like time got folded in half." She smiled. "I still remember how you looked that night, like a man who hadn't slept in weeks." "I hadn't." She turned to him more fully now, watching the way the wind ruffled his hair. "You really didn't know who I was?" "Not that night," he said. "But even if I had, I don't think it would have changed anything. You didn't need a name to shake me. Just your voice." Camille looked down, quiet. "Do you regret it?" "Every lost dollar," he said with a chuckle. "But not the decision. Never the decision." They finished their coffee in silence. The city grew louder, brighter. Later that day, Camille received a package in her office. No sender, just her name, written in a familiar looping script. She opened the box and gasped. Inside was her father's original Loopverse prototype, an old tablet, the casing scratched, the screen cracked at the corner. But it booted up, slowly. The familiar animated interface flickered to life, and there was her childhood avatar, a little girl with coding goggles and a jetpack. There was a message on the home screen. Camille, if you're reading this, it means they didn't erase us. Her breath hitched. The message continued. I knew they'd try to bury Loopverse, but I made copies. I hid them where I could, hoping one day someone with fire in their heart would find them. You were always my light, baby girl. If they thought they could snuff you out, they were wrong. Tears welled up in her eyes. She pressed a trembling hand to the screen, the cartoon avatar smiling up at her like a promise fulfilled. She brought the tablet to the boardroom that afternoon and showed her team. This, she said, is where it started. Before the lawsuits, before the funding, before the code went corporate. This was my dad's heart. I think it's time we go back to it. The room erupted in quiet claps, then cheers. The next few months were a blur of rebuilding. Camille and her team expanded the Loopverse curriculum to include creative writing, ethics, social justice modules, helping kids not just become coders, but thinkers, dreamers, citizens. The platform became a model for community tech. She spoke at conferences, but never took the spotlight for too long. She preferred classrooms to podiums, conversations to applause. Her leadership was steady, not showy. She listened more than she spoke, and when she spoke, people listened. But despite the success, there were still shadows. One night, Camille came home to find her mother sitting by the window, wrapped in a shawl, staring out at the rain. You okay, Mama? Diane turned, her eyes misty. I was just thinking about your father. He'd be so proud. Camille sat beside her, resting her head on her shoulder. Sometimes I worry, she said, that I'm just borrowing his legacy, that I'm not really building my own. Her mother took her hand, warm and firm. Baby, she said, what you've built, it's more than he ever dreamed. He gave you the seed. You grew the forest. Camille cried then, not out of sadness but out of something deeper. Release, gratitude, and something else, belonging. She spent that weekend journaling. Not because she planned to publish anything, but because she needed to make sense of the arc. Of where she'd started, where she'd landed. She wrote about the nights she had cried on her diner break, about the weight of her mother's illness, about the rage she used to carry like armor. She wrote about Logan, about Malcolm, about Elijah. She wrote about becoming herself. The last line read, I used to think legacy was something you inherited. Now I know it's something you decide to leave. Weeks later, she was invited to speak at the dedication of a new tech library named after her father. She stood before a crowd of teachers, students, city leaders. Logan sat in the front row, her mother beside him. She took a deep breath and spoke. When I was little, I believed my father was going to change the world. And he almost did. But the world, it has a way of chewing up dreamers, of calling them naive, of silencing their voices. She looked out at the faces. I stand here today not because I avoided that silence, but because I challenged it, because I believe that what my father started, what so many others continue, is worth protecting, expanding, sharing. She paused. My name is Camille Harris. I'm not a CEO. I'm not a tech mogul. I'm a daughter. I'm a fighter. I'm a builder, and I'm just getting started. The crowd stood. She didn't cry, not this time. After the event, as she stepped outside, Logan caught up to her. You crushed it, he said. She nudged him with a smile. You're biased. Absolutely. They walked in silence for a moment, the city buzzing around them. Then Logan stopped. I have a question, he said. She turned to face him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black velvet box. Her heart stilled, but when he opened it, there wasn't a ring. It was a brass key. What's this? He smiled. A space. Downtown. Old brick building. Needs work, but it's yours if you want it, for whatever you dream next. Camille stared at the key, then at him. You thought I was going to propose, didn't you? She laughed. A little, he grinned. Maybe one day. But right now, I want to keep building something with you. Not just a life, a world. She looked down at the key, then back up at him. Yes, she said. Let's build. And they walked on, not into a sunset, but into something better. A beginning they had chosen. Together. Camille Harris's journey is a powerful reminder that legacy isn't defined by titles, wealth, or even how others remember us. It's shaped by the choices we make when no one's watching, the truths we protect when it's easier to stay silent, and the dreams we dare to revive after the world tells us to let them die. This story teaches us that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, don't sign this, and changes everything. Camille didn't have money, connections, or a polished resume, but she had conviction. And that was enough to challenge corruption, restore justice, and rebuild a vision meant to serve others. She didn't wait to be rescued. She became her own answer, and in doing so, inspired others to rise, to code, to speak, and to believe again. We also learned that redemption is possible. Logan's transformation proves that it's never too late to unlearn greed, rediscover your integrity, and make things right, even if it costs you everything. In a world often driven by power and profit, choosing people, truth, and purpose is revolutionary. Above all, Camille's story is about the quiet, consistent power of one voice. Your voice. No matter where you come from, how far you've fallen, or what battles you carry, your courage can rewrite stories, restore legacies, and light the way for others. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next inspiring journey right here on our channel.